You're listening to the Whole Hog Football Podcast, sponsored by Kendall King, bringing you the latest news, position analysis, and more. Here's your hosts, Matt Jones with Andrew Joseph and Scotty Bordelon.
Arkansas plays A&M this week in Arlington. It's a similar game to last year for the Razorbacks and the Aggies in that both teams are ranked in the top 25, but the roles have reversed a little bit. Arkansas, the higher-ranked team this week, the top 10 team for its game against Texas A&M. The Aggies come in ranked number 23. We'll talk about all that today, plus the Razorbacks' 23 football schedule. Matt Jones with Tom Murphy of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, Scotty Bordelon, and Andrew Joseph of WholeHogSports.com. One of the things that is interesting to me about this year's matchup is that it reminds me so much of last year, with one big exception other than the rankings, and it's that last year we were wondering if Arkansas could beat A&M. This year we know Arkansas can beat A&M. It's just a matter of, Scotty, whether or not they'll do it again.
Yeah, I'm fully going into this weekend kind of expecting Arkansas to win this game. And I think we may have talked about it earlier in the week that A&M's a slight favorite in this game. And I personally, maybe other people in this pod have different opinions, but I can't figure out why. I mean, A&M's defense has been suspect, contributed big time to a loss at home to App State. Played well against Miami last week, but that's a completely different type of team than App State. To me, the game tends to favor Arkansas just because App State had success running the ball right at A&M, and that's kind of what Arkansas wants to do, be physical and tough and gritty for the full 60 minutes. So I think for Arkansas to win this weekend, it's going to take kind of a similar effort to last season. And it was a total battle last year. Like even Sam Pittman was bloodied and bruised up a little bit coming out of that game. But expecting a lot of the same things this year. Is just, this game is just, to me, it's kind of become a benchmark of where Arkansas is as a program.
And I think it was important for Sam Pittman and the belief part of this team to win that game last year, because it had been so long. But when you really analyze it, there were several games along the way, and I was at all of them, 2014, 2015, I think 2017. They had chances in like all those games. Even the Chad Morris years, they had the ball late with a chance to go win the game. But I do think Texas A&M's run defense numbers aren't great. And the game was a toss-up when it was first listed, and it went quickly to A&M -2. I don't know why. Max Johnson has been more the running type quarterback, and before him, Haynes King did pass for 300 something in the opener. But I don't know if they can just kind of change their stripes and let Max Johnson air it out. And that's the part that's been really hurting Arkansas.
I've been really surprised by that betting line all week, the fact that A&M's a favorite, and both of you mentioned that. If you look at the on-field results from these teams, you would, I think, have to come to the conclusion that Arkansas has had better on-field results than A&M has. The Aggies beat Miami last week. That's a ranked opponent, but Arkansas had beaten a ranked opponent, at least at the time, Cincinnati, and Cincinnati really hasn't done anything this year, in my opinion, to fall out of the AP top 25. All they did was lose by a touchdown to a team that's ranked number 10 now in Arkansas. But Arkansas's beaten South Carolina. Granted, South Carolina may not be real good this year. We'll see. They got destroyed last week by Georgia. But you can't really say that the schedules are a whole lot different that A&M has played than Arkansas has. And then of course A&M's got that loss to App State that sticks out like a sore thumb.
They do, but I think the reason why the line was established like it is, App State is a name school. They have a style, and they went in and imposed that on A&M. And Missouri State is FCS and really had a big lead and all that. And Arkansas needed two big explosive plays to beat them. So that's probably where the line came from. And they're looking at the injuries in Arkansas secondary and see that this could be a lingering problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely that. They look at Arkansas's pass defense numbers. I mean, you can you can look at it, I think, with through the lens of Arkansas secondary. There's guys injured, and this week Arkansas very well may field an alignment or a grouping that they haven't all year. I mean, that's a real possibility, and I think that there's probably some people counting on Max Johnson, feeling a little bit more settled in his second week as a starter there.
You got to score points to win games. A&M's just not scoring points this year, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. The offense is definitely not what you want out of a team that's supposed to be contending if they're played up to their recruiting rankings. But I think when you guys were talking about the line earlier, I think a lot of that stems from the fact that App State is garnering more respect than Missouri State, like we said, because they had a close game against UNC and then they pulled off the win at Troy, which I think if they would have lost to Troy, that probably wouldn't have looked so good. That would have made that loss look worse. And I think the line probably would have been skewed a bit towards Arkansas. But I think this is definitely one of the pivotal moments in the Arkansas schedule where you find out just how real this team is, because it is a big game. Whether or not A&M's struggling, it's still going to be a competitive matchup, and it's a 50-50 split between fans. And so I think there's a lot riding on this game for them for the rest of the season. And I think Tom mentioned earlier, these games always happen to be close, and I would expect that to be the same this week. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not who wins the battle between a struggling offense versus struggling pass defense. One of them, I would assume, is going to have to win that matchup. So I think whoever does that is going to be the victor.
The last 2 weeks, I think A&M's passed for 118.5 yards in those games. And they've got one guy that's got over, I think, 120 receiving yards. And it's, Ainias Smith, who's kind of been a thorn in Arkansas' side in the past. It kind of reminds me a little bit, the receiving core does of kind of maybe Arkansas's last year, where there's like clearly a number one there. And then it's just kind of some ancillary guys that maybe fill spots a little bit as best they can. It's just not an offense that's inspiring a lot of confidence right now. And Jimbo's going to get, even more under pressure if that offense doesn't start clicking soon.
Ancillary, that's a great word. I think A&M is going to feed the ball to A-Chain the back, and if they can establish the run, he'll get it even more. And then Ainias Smith. And other than that, just probably small targetings. But Arkansas is going to have to contend with and tackle in open space on tunnel screens, on swing passes, on screens. I mean, that's going to be a huge diet for them. And the linebackers are going to have to get out there and cover in space. And the safeties and the nickels are going to have to come in and make tackles in the open field. And if they can't do it, A&M is going to just keep it up.
Yeah, tackling's been an issue for Arkansas, but Scotty, what did we say? 47 missed tackles through 3 games?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And as dominant as Drew Sanders has been for like long stretches of games, like he's completely taken over ball games, like in each of the last 3 weekends. But he leads Arkansas with 11 missed tackles, which is kind of stunning. Like I know it stood out a little bit maybe in week 1, and you kind of chalked it up to, it's just, his first game in a new defense. He's trying to get his bearings about him. Missed 5 last week.
Yeah, he had a lot last week.
And Bumper Pool, I think, missed 3, which, kind of made me question if he was entirely healthy, because we saw some of the same things in that 2020 season, and come to find out he's playing with some busted up ribs. So I think, Arkansas they've got to improve in their tackling. I think I looked at PFF numbers in terms of tackling grade during Sam Pittman's tenure, and last week against Missouri State was the 3rd worst tackling grade that they've had in Sam's time here. So something's got to improve, or A&M might find their footing on offense quicker than they thought.
I think you can chalk up some of the things that have hurt Arkansas this year to being correctable mistakes. I think you can improve your tackling. I think you can improve your penalty problems. I think you can improve, obviously, ball security, which was a big problem for them last week against Missouri State. Sam Pittman even said on his radio show Wednesday night that they had gone through an extra ball security drill on Wednesday just to hammer home the importance of holding on to the ball, because I think we're all in agreement that had it not been for that 3-0 turnover margin in favor of Missouri State last week, that probably would not have been a very competitive game. I mean, Arkansas had darn near 600 yards of offense. I think they had 600 yards right on the nose until they took a kneel down in the 4th quarter. And you just don't see a lot of teams only come up with 38 points when you're going for 600 plus offensively.
Absolutely, that's true. I mean, when you fumble on the 1 yard line, the other fumble I think occurred on the 36 or the 38. So they were moving it on both of those. And then the third one was the Trey Knox, right in his hands and tipped and intercepted. So a team that had really hung its hat on ball security lost at 3-0. And I don't think, Missouri State would still have moved the ball effectively in that game. They had a fantastic game plan. The throwbacks to the tight end, that one down the sideline of Jordan Jones, all the things they did were just schemed up. And so Arkansas will be a better ball security team going forward, because you look at what happened. A linebacker just came in and physically grabbed KJ's arm and just wrenched the ball away. And I know you got to protect on that, but that was just a real targeted takeaway, and he did a great job with it. And then a helmet on the ball. I know Rocket Sanders was really hard on himself, but when a helmet hits the ball, it's pretty hard to hold on to. So a little bit of bad fortune too.
You add in the questionable 4th and 9 call. Maybe you get a little bit of a better play in there instead of that inside run. Maybe you pick up a first down, and then that could be potentially 39 or 40 more offensive yards, and Arkansas sitting well over the 600-yard mark, maybe pushing 700 by the end of the game. Is if you just you're a little bit cleaner, come up with some better play calls in critical situations, and just be a little bit more ball secure.
It really feels like the last 2 weeks, the only thing that stopped Arkansas offensively is itself. And now it's going to be a better, or probably a harder challenge against A&M. But I don't know how, other than the turnovers last week, how you can't like what you've seen from Arkansas offensively. And I think it starts with Rocket Sanders. And I mentioned this the other day, that through 3 games this year, his yards from scrimmage, 557 yards. And Darren McFadden in 2007, when he was a Heisman finalist, Heisman runner-up, 575 yards from scrimmage through 3 games. And so, that's an elite pace, I guess, if you want to use that word, through 3 games. Probably a little early to start talking about pace that he's on. But these are McFadden-like numbers that he's putting up, Tom.
Yeah, they certainly are. And what will Dominic Johnson's health do to his carry count? And honestly, he wouldn't have gotten as many carries had they gone ahead and taken control of the game last week. So he's on a good pace in terms of attempts. I don't know if you want to quite keep that up. I mean, it'd be great if he could rush for 1,000 yards. But I want to see AJ Green and Dubinion and Dominic Johnson too. But we do have to recognize that Rocket Sanders is a phenomenal athlete, and if he keeps this up, he's going to have a year that Razorback fans won't forget.
It'd be shocking at this point if he didn't get to 1,000 yards, right? I mean, he's at 440 through 3 games.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. I legitimately think he might be one of the maybe top 2 or 3 NFL prospects that's going to take the field this weekend. I think, I've said it probably since the offseason. I think he's a pro. I mean, he can just do so many things for you offensively. He's explosive, and the fumble last week was out of character for him. Like, he's normally like really, really secure with the football. He could split out in the slot and go catch a pass for you. He can take a shovel pass to the house, make guys miss and go to the house. Doesn't exactly have like that breakaway speed maybe that McFadden had, but I think, his name's Rocket for a reason. His first step is legit. I think this, like, if he has a really good game this weekend and then maybe follows it up with another solid performance, I think he's a guy that goes from, someone who's talked about as like just a really good back in the SEC to, I don't know, maybe he might be jumping into that, maybe that dark horse Heisman Trophy conversation.
Yeah, I think you guys are all, I agree with all your points. I think Rocket's a special player for Arkansas, and the fumbling, I don't think is really much of an issue with Rocket or KJ, largely because they had a large sample of carries last year where they didn't have ball security concerns. And I could say the same thing about the missed tackles for Bumper Pool, just because he's got such a large body of work where he's been a superb tackler. And so those 2 areas of concern aren't really something I'm worried about going forward. I think they were more of a one-off situation.
By the way, on Poole last week, he passed Sam Olajibutu for 4th on the UA career tackle mark. We all think he's going to break this record of Tony Buas at some point this season. He could pass 2 more this weekend. I think he needs 3 tackles to pass Ken Hamlin for number 3, and he needs 4 tackles to pass Jerry Franklin for number 2. And so that's probably going to happen this weekend with Poole and doing it, Tom, in his hometown, basically, of Arlington, not too far from where he grew up in the Allen area.
Yeah, that's right. Read the ADG tomorrow, writing a little something about Sanders, who's, from Denton, also in the Metroplex, and then, bumper from Lucas. He's he played a little bit of a third wheel almost last year to Morgan and Hayden Henry. He did not start, but the opener, one game, and still led the team and with 120 tackles. Just been an upstanding kid. And when I asked Sam about him approaching the record, he's like, man, what a great kid. Is maybe one of the prompts for him to return was I have a shot at that. So yeah, a little concerning that he was coming out some in the second half last week. Hope he's doing good. And if he keeps a pace, I believe it's going to be the road game at BYU, y'all, that he would take the record.
You talked about those guys who are from Dallas, and one of the reasons Arkansas even scheduled this series in the first place down there was the ability to go get recruits out of the DFW area. But playing at AT&T Stadium's a big deal. You don't have to be from Dallas for it to be a big deal. I mean, you might be from the state of Texas, say like a player like Ketron Jackson, and that was where the UIL state championships are and where you want to go play. You could be from Oklahoma and be a Cowboys fan, from Arkansas, a Cowboys fan. There's a lot of players that Dallas is a draw to them, and you don't have to necessarily be from there. And and I think about all that as I'm thinking about one of the, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with the betting line for this weekend. I think that there's a perception, and it's an incorrect perception, that this is an A&M home game, and we've all been there, and it's not. It is a legit 50-50 split. Now, there might be years where A&M has more people there. The thought process going into this one is that Arkansas is going to have more people there. Sam Pittman said on his radio show Wednesday night that he's been told that Arkansas is outpacing A&M at about 4,000 more tickets sold as of yesterday. I got an email this afternoon from Vivid Seats that said this is the most expensive ticket on the secondary market this week, an average of $229 per ticket, even higher than Florida and Tennessee. And I think that, a lot of that is due to the demand from the Arkansas crowd to go down there and watch this team. And, so this is a big deal, I think, more than just for, the players like Poole going in there to Dallas. And I guess what I'm trying to say, trying to get to this point, I'm having a hard time getting there, but it's not an A&M home game. But Tom, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do know what you're saying. And, it's been that way. I mean, maybe during the Chad Morris years, there was a couple of lulls maybe, but Razorback fans represent. And I know this series might be coming to an end in that locale, but it's been good for them. It's good for recruiting. I think the fans enjoy doing it. I certainly enjoy going to the game. So, yeah, Arkansas will have nice representation.
But, even you had mentioned this earlier, that Morris's 2 teams, they played the $9 million man, Jimbo Fisher, really well there. I mean, it was 24-17 and 18. It was 31-27 and 19. I think in both of those games, they had the ball late with a chance to tie or take the lead. There's something about motivation, I think, in this game. And it seems like Arkansas is always more motivated to play this game than A&M is. And I think that's the only way you can describe the results on the field. We talked about the Bielema years where Kevin Sumlin's teams were clearly more talented than the ones that Arkansas put out there. And certainly that was the case in 18 and 19. But it seems like every year Arkansas is right there throwing punches with A&M into the fourth quarter, into overtime. And, I wonder what the motivation is. I guess that's what I was trying to get to earlier. I was playing in Dallas. I wonder what the motivation is for A&M versus what the motivation is for Arkansas, who seems like they're always a lot more geared up for this game than the Aggies are.
Yeah, I would say maybe the motivation for A&M is that, they need to, put a win under their belt, another win under their belt that kind of, I don't know if it makes up for the Appalachian State loss, but more or less gets their season, back in a positive trajectory. They need something good to happen to them. I know Jimbo's probably feeling the heat right now, even though they did beat a pretty good Miami team last weekend. Their defense played well with the offense, which is what Jimbo's known for. Is just it's it's scuffling right now. I think Sam does a really good job of pumping into his guys that each game has a lot of importance, but he also likes to mention the fact that it's a trophy game. I don't think we asked Sam about that until Tom did it on Wednesday, and a big smile came to Sam's face. It means something, to go get that trophy, especially in what Sam likes to call Mr. Jones's building. I think it's been a good series for Arkansas and Arlington, and I'm gonna kind of hate to see it go because I really like eating prime rib in the press box. That's pretty fun, and then the games are usually pretty good too.
Well, I don't know what A&M's motivations were during all the Sumlin years, but they managed to find a way to rally. I cannot think of a more symbolic series during the Brett Bielema years to kind of put the bow on. They were a tough team, but they lost a lot of close games. And the A&M series, you can argue that in 14, Arkansas really should have won, if not for the skipper tripping call. And they still had a field goal to go up 10 with just a couple minutes left in the game. 15, same thing. I felt like, Arkansas was in better position to win the game. And now 16, A&M pulled away, but that was after stopping Arkansas on a 4th and, I think they stopped 2 or 3 plays down there with goal to go on about the 1. And then in 17, Arkansas was in a better position to win the game, I felt like. So they A&M's found its motivation and found ways to win 9 in a row.
Well, they should have won because they were the more talented team. And I think you said that those games couldn't have spoken any better to Brett Bielema Sr. Probably couldn't speak much better to A&M either. The fact that they're more talented than the other team, they have trouble putting them away. That's kind of been A&M's forte, I guess, since they've been in the SEC, really, not living up to expectations. Been that way, certainly to this point this season.
I think Tom's right about the motivation, and I think the winning streak that A&M was on definitely kind of culminated into them maybe not being so up for that game as Arkansas was. They probably were a little more used to winning, and Arkansas was probably very anxious to snap that long losing streak. And so I think the motivation for A&M this year is probably starting a new winning streak, and the same for Arkansas would be extending a winning streak.
This is the SEC opener for A&M too. Arkansas's already played South Carolina. If Arkansas wins on Saturday, it'd be the first time that they've started 2-0 in SEC play since their SEC West championship in 2006. I think we're all under the impression that this series is going away from Arlington after 24. You got to have two sides that want to tango here, and A&M, Ross Bjork, he doesn't want to do it. He's been pretty clear in that. Even Jimbo Fisher's statements this week were pretty clear that he wishes that this game was in College Station this year. And from Arkansas' standpoint, you're hearing that a little bit more. Hunter Yurachek made some comments a year or two ago about how they need to have more marquee games at home, and A&M certainly would fit into that bill. Even Sam Pittman this week, Tom, was talking about just the challenges of when you're the home team in Arlington. Basically the challenges that it presents as a recruiter. You can have players there, but you can't really communicate with them. And then you throw the Little Rock angle in, like with the 2023 schedule. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But it really gets challenging because I think you can only have players at an off-campus venue one time. So you have to choose between, hey, do we have recruits in Arlington or do we have recruits in Little Rock? And that's probably not that hard of a choice.
No, probably not. And and I don't think Arkansas folks will ever denigrate or say that it wasn't a good deal to play the games in Arlington in Jerry Jones Stadium. However, the 2023 schedule is a prime example of what can happen to you when one of your home games is played in Arlington. And so they'll have that, I think it's a 6-week stretch with only one game at home, and it's against Mississippi State. And there's this long stretch that includes, the Alabama game and this game and LSU, and I think Florida's at the end of it. Maybe Ole Miss is in there as well, and they're going to travel to all of those except Mississippi State.
And we'll talk more about the 2023 schedule here in just a moment. I want to tell you that the Whole Hog Football Podcast is sponsored by Kendall King Design, Displays, Signage, KendallKing.com. That's KendallKing.com.
The Kendall King Group family of companies plays to win, just like our hogs. We know how demanding retail marketing is today. From digital omni-channel creative services through in-store signing and displays, and finally to social influence. We've got you covered. Our KKG Inc. family of companies, Kindle King, Shopcart Creative, and Soapbox Influence are winning with multiple retailers and brands. We play to win and will be a winning partner for all your retail marketing service needs. Go Hogs!
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for Whole Hog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today. Welcome back to the Whole Hog Football Podcast.
We want to invite you to the Hogs Illustrated Sports Club. Our next meeting will be next Wednesday, September 28th. Ben Cleveland, the former Razorback tight end, will be there, and he'll be talking about the last time the Razorbacks beat Alabama. He had basically the game-winning touchdown pass or touchdown catch to beat Alabama in 2006. Ben will talk about his experience playing the Crimson Tide. We'll also talk to him about his entire college career. The Hogs Illustrated Sports Club on Wednesdays. That's at the Hilton Garden Inn in Fayetteville, just off of Weddington Drive. If you want more information, nwadealpiggy.com. Arkansas released its 2023 schedule earlier this week. The SEC released the full schedule for 23 earlier this week. And unless there was a mess up like they had in baseball, that schedule is going to stand for next year. If you didn't see the baseball news, they had to recall their schedule 2 days after they put it out the week before. And we mentioned earlier that it's a unique schedule for Arkansas. They play a lot of non-conference games in Arkansas early in the season, and then there's basically a giant gap in the middle of the season where they don't play many home games. They play a lot of games away from home, and they will finish the season with 3 straight home games against Auburn, Florida International, and Missouri. Heard a lot of talk this week about the schedule. Why is this happening? Why is that happening? We'll break it down just a little bit. What I think are 2 or 3 of the key deals. Number one is that they opened the season with Western Carolina at War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock. And I've heard from a lot of people this week, hey, I didn't think we were going to play in Little Rock again until Arkansas State in 2025. And they're actually going to open the next 2 seasons in Little Rock. They play Western Carolina in 23. They'll open the 24 season with UAPB there in 2024. And then they'll play Arkansas State in 2025. That won't be a season opener, at least for now. The SEC schedule obviously could potentially change, and that might change how they have to schedule their games in 25. But you look at Western Carolina in Little Rock, Tom, and man, is that a letdown after an offseason leading up to a big game against Cincinnati. Here we go. You're going to play Western Carolina, probably in a stadium that's going to have a lot of open seats.
Yeah, well, it's the flip side to the Cincinnati game and all the motivation and summer workouts. Hey, we're going to play a ranked team. We got to be ready. Well, in this case, look at the schedule this season. There was one game that people thought, okay, easy game, maybe. And that was Missouri State. And it wound up not being an easy game. So they're going to have a schedule this year. Even when Liberty comes in here, it probably is going to be tough. That it's just hard. And it's hard to get your team up week after week, get them motivated, have them at peak physical condition. And so I don't have a problem with playing a Western Carolina, but it just so happens to be the opener. And I hope that the excitement of it being the season opener will bring a bigger crowd to War Memorial.
It'll be the first time they've opened a game or opened a season at War Memorial since 2017. And they thought that having the season opener there in 2017 would kind of inject some attendance into that stadium. And there were only like 36,000 people there. Now, that was on a Thursday night. That probably played a little bit of a factor, but I can't imagine that it would have been, 16, 19,000 more people in there for a Saturday game. I think when you start against an FCS team, there's just not a lot of there's not a lot of excitement there. And when you're talking about the the cost of attending games is so much higher than it used to be. I think people are speaking with their pocketbooks and saying, we don't want to go to these games. We're going to save our money. And that game's not part of a season ticket package anyway. We're going to save our money for, the 2 or 3 biggest games of the year and go to a secondary site and buy tickets that way or get them through a mini plan. I think it's going to be a pretty sparsely attended game. One of the other things that I heard about, Scotty, was, people wondering, why is Florida on the schedule again? They played Florida in Florida 3 years ago or 2 years ago in 2020. It'll be 3 years by the time they go there in 2023. But the reason that this exists is because in 2014, the SEC put together a cross-divisional schedule where West teams played East teams. You got your one permanent opponent, so Arkansas, Missouri, and then you rotate the rest of them. And this is where Florida comes in on the rotation. In 2020, Florida was a late addition to the schedule along with Georgia.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing for Arkansas that right before that Florida game that they get a little bit of a break. Finally, their bye week comes late October, which also works out well for me because my wife's birthday is in late October. That's always feel like I'm going into the season 1-0 when that happens. But that Florida game is, you come off a bye week and you get right back into the kind of schedule that you just played. Like there's a stretch, BYU at LSU, A&M, neutral site at Ole Miss, at Alabama, Mississippi State's never easy or fun to play against, whether it's home or on the road. It's just always a tough game. Am I right saying that Arkansas has played at Florida 4 of the last 5 times they've met?
That probably sounds right. I know they played in Fayetteville in 2016, but they've had a lot of trips down there, and Florida hasn't been to Fayetteville a whole lot. And that's the type of thing that's going to get addressed and fixed through the SEC's new scheduling format, is that you're not going to have these long gaps between when a team comes to your campus or you go to their campus. Like in 2024, as long as OU and Texas doesn't come to the league early, Arkansas is going to host Kentucky, and that would be the first time that Kentucky had come to Fayetteville, I think, in 12 years. And so it's going to address a lot of that stuff. We've seen it with Georgia, Vanderbilt, some of these other places that Arkansas goes. And one other thing, I've heard a lot of people talking about the SEC's trying to shove it to Arkansas by putting all of the tough games right there in the middle of the season and not having a lot of games in Fayetteville. A lot of this is self-inflicted by the Razorbacks, because what happens is that you have your games that are contracted and you give that to the league, and then they basically have to put the puzzle together based on the games that are already in place. And so Arkansas had a game in place against Western Carolina and Little Rock, a game against Kent State, a game against BYU. That's the first 3 weeks. And then they've always got that date in September that's set with Texas A&M. You got to have that contracted with AT&T Stadium so they can build the rest of their schedule at the stadium. And then at the back end of the season, Arkansas has scheduled FIU for the second to last weekend of the season, and then they've always got that game against Missouri. And so basically what you have is that you've got 6 teams: Alabama, Ole Miss, Auburn, who am I leaving out here? You got Florida, you got 2 of the other SEC West teams, LSU and I guess Mississippi State. And so you've got to find you've got a 7-week window, basically, when you think about those contracted games, a 7-week window to put those 6 games. There wasn't a whole lot that they could do other than jam pack Arkansas' schedule, Tom, with those tough games in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it all funneled that way. It's just unfortunate for them. And Scotty, yes, you were right. When they play next year in Gainesville, it will be 4 out of the 5. And they got the ripoff game in 2009 where the ref shoved it to them. You had the 2013 game, Brett Bielema's first year. And then you had the 2020 game, the COVID year, where the SEC bestowed that game upon the Razorbacks along with Georgia.
Yeah, so it's quite a few years that Arkansas is going to Florida. And that'll change when the new format comes out. You're going to start seeing Arkansas go to Florida once every 4 years probably, and Florida come into Fayetteville once every 4 years. And so it'll work out a lot better than the schedule that the SEC has in place. All right, speaking of Florida, it's prediction time. Tennessee's playing Florida this week in one of the more hyped games of the weekend. Not a whole lot of big games on tap this weekend. In fact, when we were putting together our predictions for our Hogs Illustrated Game Day Extra, we had to go out of conference for a lot of them just because there are some SEC games like Alabama, Vanderbilt. I don't think we want to waste our time predicting that one. But the 2 big games this week are Florida and Tennessee. and Arkansas, Texas A&M. But before we get to that one, Tom, one other SEC game that kind of intrigues is Missouri goes to Auburn in what I guess you might label the hot seat bowl. The loser going to be really feeling it from his fan base.
Well, isn't that the truth? And, I give Missouri a fighter's chance to go in there, but Auburn will rally up, and if those players have pride and all that, they'll have a good game plan. Missouri has not proven to be super powerful yet this year, and I think Auburn will win it.
Wouldn't you know it, there's been a bunch of drama at Auburn this week. We're talking about the health or I guess the lack of transparency, I guess, with injuries from Brian Harsin. That's been something, but it is Auburn to a T. I still think Auburn is a better football team than Missouri. I kind of struggled to pick a winner in this game, but truth be told, all I had to look at on the Missouri side was that blowout loss at Kansas State. That kind of told me about everything I need to know.
Yeah, I've also got Auburn. I think they have a good home advantage there. They have a good crowd. I think neither of these programs are really anything special right now, but I specifically think Missouri's just kind of dreadful, so I don't see them winning.
Isn't it interesting that both of those teams, their losses are the teams from other Power 5 conferences almost by an identical score? Missouri lost to Kansas State 40-12, and Auburn lost to Penn State 41-12. But, I look at who else those teams have played, and if I had any inkling about picking Missouri, I would have thrown it out the window when I saw that K-State turned around and lost to Tulane on its home field the next week. And so that K-State loss even looks worse relative to what the Wildcats did the next week. I think Auburn will beat Missouri, but man, what an ugly game that one could potentially be. We mentioned that Florida goes to Tennessee this week. This is I guess it's the darling game of the week. I was watching CBS Sports Network earlier this week, their Inside College Football show. They said there were two top 25 matchups this week: Clemson, Wake Forest, and Tennessee, Florida. And it's Arkansas A&M. That's another top 25 matchup. But it was this way for a lot of years, Tom. Whenever Tennessee and Florida played, it seemed like everything else just kind of disappeared into the background. And now that you've got both teams in the top 25, there's going to be a lot of hype about that one this weekend.
There will be. And, it's week to week. And so reflecting on the Missouri games or on this game, it's just how you have your team prepared and ready to go that week. And I think Florida will be better prepared than they were against South Florida last week, and maybe than they were against Kentucky, but they simply do not have the firepower, I don't think, to hang with Tennessee. This is going to be a hyped up Tennessee deal, much like the Arkansas game for Texas last year, and I've got the Vols.
Yeah, I think folks in Tennessee are legitimately excited about the team that they've got on the field again, which is kind of crazy considering where they were not too awful long ago. Hendon Hooker seems like he's the real deal. I think it'll probably be a pretty close game. Maybe Tennessee pulls away, maybe win by 10 or 14 points, maybe get a couple scores late to pull away. But I like Tennessee. It seems like their offense is pretty explosive and fun to watch.
Yeah, I fell into the Florida trap after week one, and I watched Anthony Richardson run for over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I think I even mentioned on the podcast that I thought he was going to have a really bright season. And then in the last 2 weeks, he hasn't scored a single touchdown. And I think he's got more tackles than touchdowns this year. So I'm not going to make the same mistake twice, and I took the Vols.
That's a phenomenal stat, by the way, on Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I don't know if Florida can hang with Tennessee. You talked about it. You think it's going to be a close game, Scotty? I wouldn't be surprised if this is a blowout. I just don't know that Florida can hang with Tennessee offensively based on what I have seen from them this season, unless they can create some turnovers and set up some short fields. I think Tennessee may win this one really big. I think Florida's kind of walking into a buzzsaw on Rocky Top this weekend. All right, Arkansas and A&M. It's a 6 o'clock kickoff on ESPN. The Razorbacks are undefeated. The Aggies are 2-1. They've got that loss to Appalachian State. Arkansas finally has a winning streak. I guess if you count one game, a winning streak. Can they add to that this week, Tom?
I gave a lot of thought to this one, and A&M is going to have motivation. A&M is probably going to have a solid game plan offensively. We don't know what that is yet, but I picked Arkansas, and I think special teams, I think A&M is probably, they have a deeper special teams in terms of returners and kickers and punters than Arkansas has, and that could be problematic. But I feel like Arkansas is going to make some key play and pull this one out.
You know, we've talked a little bit this week about how there are similarities in what potentially this game could be and last season's game against A&M. The difference in the game last year was Arkansas's pass rush. Like, Trey Williams completely dominated whoever was across the line of scrimmage for him at left tackle, and was like the biggest and best player in that game. And Arkansas's got multiple guys that are capable of putting up similar type numbers in the same game. And it's just, I think Arkansas's, I guess you could call it a three-headed monster with Drew Sanders, Jordan Dominic, and Zach Williams. Those guys have been pretty relentless getting after the quarterback. Arkansas, I think, on both sides, on both lines of scrimmages, are better on the offensive line. They're better on the defensive line. I think the defense makes a difference with this pass rush, and Arkansas wins.
When we started doing these picks and I looked at this matchup on the schedule last week, I thought for sure I was going to comfortably pick Arkansas just because they had a game against Missouri State the week before, and A&M had a tough game against Miami. So I thought maybe Arkansas would blow by Missouri State and just kind of cruise on into this big matchup, but it didn't work out that way, which kind of makes me a little uneasy about taking the Hogs. But on the flip side, A&M didn't really do enough against Miami to convince me that they're going to beat Arkansas. So I did take the Razorbacks.
I think it really comes down to which team's defense, plays best. I mean, you got A&M, they've been so good defensively, but I don't think they've seen an offense like Arkansas. And then on the flip side, Arkansas, it's been such a weird year defensively. They get great pressure on the quarterbacks, but whenever they're not getting pressure, they're giving up so many big shots through the air. But I don't know that they've seen an offense quite as inept as Texas A&M's this year. And so I went with Arkansas. I think that, the Razorbacks have got a lot going for them. I think there's going to be a big motivation to beat A&M and set up that big game next week with Alabama and Fayetteville. Now, you got to be careful not to overlook it or overlook A&M, with that game coming up the week after. I have a hard time picking a team that can't score points. And A&M just has not been able to score this year. They beat Sam Houston State 31-0 in the opener. But the last 2 weeks when they've, played App State and Miami, I think it's 31 points total in those two games. And some of those have been on special teams. Some have been set up by defensive turnovers. I just don't trust A&M's offense. I think Arkansas goes down there and has a real good chance to win this week as long as they can take care of the ball. Should certainly be a good game, though. Arkansas and A&M, 6 o'clock Saturday night. Go to wholehogsports.com before, during, and after the game for all of our coverage from Arlington. And we'll be back with another podcast next week to recap the Razorbacks and the Aggies and preview what could potentially be a top 10 matchup the following week in Fayetteville when Alabama comes to town. For Tom Murphy, Andrew Joseph, and Scotty Bordelon, I'm Matt Jones. We appreciate you joining us. Have a great weekend, everyone.
The proceeding has been a production of wholehogsports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at wholehogsports.com for the latest news and commentary.